With all the wild recruiting runs that we've seen here in the last couple of weeks in college football, which teams will finish in the top 10 of the recruiting rankings?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets with a first bet of $5 down and it being a winner. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things that are happening right now because this is by far the busiest week of the year prior to National Signing Day. It's bananas with all the different commitments. I'm going to see Cedarian Morgan's commitment tomorrow in Alexander City, Alabama. Like, there's all kinds of kids committing across the country. With that, I thought it would be a really good time to discuss who's in the top 10 of like recruiting rankings. I'm going to use 24/7's rankings today, but kind of go over that, what your team or whoever you follow, what they have to do to get into that list or stay. We're also going to be discussing Georgia and Alabama, why they have risen up the rankings. This is something I've talked about, hinted about quite a bit, but patience is a virtue in life, and it is really important in recruiting. We're going to talk about the most recent commitments as well. And again, there's more guys getting ready to pop. So everything you need right here on the Portal Podcast. Let's talk about the recruiting rankings overall. There's a list of players going to schools all over. Like, just as an example, kid I'll talk about here in a minute with UGA, Chase Calicut from North Shore High School, one of the longest DBs you're ever going to see, commits to UGA over Texas. That helps the Dogs. They got 9, I believe it was through yesterday or today, I forget the exact date, but 9 verbal commitments in 10 days. 9. That is ridiculous. One of the young men that committed was a quote-unquote 3-star. He was the only 3-star by rivals. And he was a 6'6", 240-pound defensive end that's got all kinds of skill. If that is your lowest guy, that's an incredible recruiting heater. So congrats to the Georgia staff. They've earned it. But it brings up the point that I alluded to in the opening. Patience. Georgia found the guys they wanted to go after. They stayed on those players. They did not sit back and say, you know what, let's just get a bunch of guys to commit. These guys are good enough, blah, blah, blah. They went for the elite players, and they stayed patient, and now they're being rewarded. Bama, who I'll talk about in a minute, is doing the same. So the teams that I'm about to talk about in the top 10, and I've just got a list here on my iPad. I'll just kind of go over it. These are schools that, by and large, were very patient. The one exception is, ironically, the one at the top, and it's a very unique deal. But everybody else, for the most part, these are schools that have hit the home run since mid-May until right now. Like the last 4 to 6 weeks, give or take, has been really good, and patience is the key. So let's just start. Again, I'm using 24/7's list, and you can use whatever you want. But this list is a good barometer. If you look at the list right now, Penn State comes in at number 10. Not exactly shocking. James Franklin and his staff do a tremendous job. They've got 23 commits as of the morning of Tuesday, July 1st. Michigan, they've got 18 commits. They just got a couple of really good players, and they're still trending. They've got a chance to finish in the top 10 by any barometer. This is a team that I knew they didn't start fast, but man, if anybody on this list, Michigan probably is the best to use as an example. Congrats to Sharon Moore and his staff. They went after kids all over the country, Virginia, Florida, Texas, California, all over. And they're starting to get some of those commitments to come home to roost. They even flipped a kid that was committed to SMU. They're a really good staff at figuring it out and finding what they want for a Michigan fit. So good for the Wolverines. Alabama, they've got like 6 commitments in the last 10 days or 12 days, something like that. They're doing really good. 15 commitments overall. But as of like, let's say 3-4 weeks ago, I was doing a crossover podcast with Locked On SEC. They had like 6 guys committed. They have done a great job. Once again, kind of like Michigan, kind of like Georgia. We're going after the elite guys. We're going to wait for them. We believe in ourselves. These are the guys we want. These football recruits, we're going to find a way to get them. They're doing a really good job. Alabama, by the way, if they get Sedarian Morgan and a couple other kids that I think they're going to get, they've got a great, not a good, a great chance to finish in the top 5 of the recruiting rankings. Right now, number 8 for the Crimson Tide. Number 7, a little surprising to me, but you got to give credit to Dabo Swinney and his staff. Culture is the thing that everybody talks about when I get a chance to do a face-to-face interview with a Clemson commit. These guys, they're looking for something a little different. Religion's a part of it, team bonding, the lack of transfers. They want kids that know they're going to be developed. They're okay with if they don't make immediate impacts. They want them to be long-term Clemson play. Like all of that has worked, and they've hit a higher rate on their visits than anybody. It's insane how well Clemson does. Probably the best in the country, to be honest. They're number 7. They got 20 commitments. They're still on the board for a few more guys too. So Clemson's really good. Miami, now they slowed down a little bit, but they got off to a pretty good start, and they've gotten a consistent level of commitments over the last 2 months, but they're still waiting. Like Derek Cooper backed off his commitment date of July 12th. I thought they were going to get him then. There's a few other guys they're still chasing. They're going to make announcements in the next couple of weeks, but they've got a really good class. Mario Cristobal and his staff, elite, getting out on the road and finding kids from across the country. They do a great job. Ohio State, not exactly shocking. Number 5 on this list. They have 19 commitments. They have been steadfast. By the way, Wilder, the defensive lineman they just got from California, he might end up as the number 1 D lineman, period, in this class as a pass rusher. He's in that level, like elite pass rusher. Just what Ohio State needs, right? Another great one. And he's a kid over 250 pounds that can move. That's a special player. Ohio State's class, pretty safe bet. They'll finish in the top 5. A&M, I'm not completely shocked, but it's how they did it. Georgia kids, New Jersey, California. And now they're finally starting to get some of the kids from in-state and the Lone Star State. And that's just a really good group. But they charged out a little bit too. Not completely. It's just, it was so odd because the Aggies were getting kids, they had more kids committed in Georgia, literally, than Texas for a while. That's bizarre. They had like 9 kids committed at one point, 2 or 3 from Georgia, like 1 kid from Texas or something. It's crazy. You could make an argument the biggest surprise, debatable, but biggest surprise in this top group, especially for top 5, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in Marcus Freeman. Number 3, they've got 22 commitments, and that number is about to grow significantly. If I'm right, they could end up with 27, 28 commits. It's not out of the question. There's always a chance of a flip at the end. They're in on some receivers. They're in on some other guys. Do not be surprised if Notre Dame finishes with close to 30 commitments in a top 3 class. This is going to be their best recruiting class in over 30 years, since the 1990 class had Jerome Bettis, Bryant Young, etc. Elite job. But again, they went after their kids. They've been patient. They were trending for some kids, and then they weren't. But they've won a lot of battles right at the very end. Again, patience. Don't overdo it. Don't go for kids that, quite honestly, aren't going to move the needle for you. Notre Dame's class is elite. They have earned it. 2 is Georgia. 9 commitments in 10 days. We knew they were going to go on a run, but they were incredible. And then Southern Cal, the one team on this list that did not wait around. They went after the kids they wanted, but they just steamrolled. They were a bunch of butcher knives rolled up together into a bowling ball and just cut through everybody. Right now, SC has 30 commitments. That is just wild. I'm curious to see what SC does for the rest of the cycle because, again, they weren't patient to get to this point, like the vast majority of these other schools. But they've got about 4 or 5 spots left. Will they be patient, trying to flip some kids they missed on, etc.? That's how you end up in the top 10. We come back, I'm going to give a few predictions on my top 10. Then we're going to jump into what Georgia and Bama did in terms of a few schools that they beat out, how important that is. And then to finish up, we're going to talk some commitments. That's next here on the Portal Podcast. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer, FanDuel is the best way to get in on the action and make it more exciting. You've already followed the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I was just looking at MLB stats, and there's all kinds of different ways you can do player props and season-long projections, in addition to like just over-unders and the basic betting on baseball. But here's one that I think would be fascinating. There's multiple guys you could do it. Shotani, you've got Eric Judge, you've got Raleigh, different guys that are just smashing the baseball. Can any one of them win 2, if not 3 of the major batting stats? Average, home runs, and RBIs. It's not out of the question like Judge is leading all of baseball batting like 354. Is it possible he could win the Triple Crown? I don't know what those odds are, but I think those would be fun. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today and visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I truly appreciate you stopping in. We're starting to expand a little bit. I'm going to be talking about not just the teams and their recruiting efforts, but my season predictions, win-loss totals in conjunction with recruiting. Everything I do is going to have recruiting in it, or the portal, or both. But I'm going to talk about the teams that I think are going to make the playoff, teams that are going to surprise, especially Big 12. I'm going to be talking a lot of Big 12 football coming up, so make sure you check out the Portal Podcast. Now back to the team rankings. We're going to have some fun here. I just went over what 24/7 has for their team rankings right now. By and large, I think the teams that are up there now, we're to that point, it's not going to massively change. But give yourself the thought process of who can surprise, who can finish in the top 10, whether it's on 3, 24/7, whatever, who can jump into that mix. Penn State was number 10. You got Notre Dame up there higher and possible. Could they drop down? Could they go back up? There are a lot of different things to look at. But when I look at this list and I kind of go into it, there are a few schools that depends on your perspective on where they should be. The team that I think will end up in the top 10, because they've got, let's see, right now, LSU has 11 commitments. Do we really think LSU is going to finish outside the top 10? I do not. That class per player is probably the most talented so far in the country. But again, just 11. For full disclosure, USC literally almost has 3 times as many commits. They got 30. How you do the metrics, it's different for every network. But this is what I know. LSU, especially for those in-state kids or Southern Mississippi kids or Houston area, East Texas kids, late in the process, historically have done very well. And the staff with Frank Wilson and everybody, I think not only will LSU finish in the top 10, I think they will finish borderline top 5, if not top 5. If they hit the inside straight, they could be top 3. There's still a lot of guys on the board, and there's the chance if they get a quarterback, that's the big part. I don't know. If they get a quarterback, if they flip somebody, Jake Fett from Arizona State, whatever it is, this could be a top 3 class. The start of the class is really good. And again, patience. They're not just taking guys to take guys. They want fits. They want guys that want to be there. They want guys that will be there for the long haul. Say what you want about Brian Kelly. He is really good at roster management. But did that at Notre Dame. He's done it at LSU, putting players together. They're going to fit long-term. They took some chances the first couple of years, but they backed off that. And I think it's going to work pretty well this season and on down the line. So we'll see what happens for him this year down the stretch of recruiting. But LSU is one of the schools that I think will finish very high. Another school that I'm very, very curious about, and it's going to depend on the season, is Florida. They've got a really good class so far. Really good. But there are a bunch of kids that I know flat out just from face-to-face conversations. Will Billy Napier be in Gainesville long-term? I don't know. They don't know. They want to see those games. Like they play, I think it's week 3 or 4. They go to to Miami Gardens to play the University of Miami. If they win that game, by the way, I'm picking Florida to win the game because of Lagway. If they win that game, they could jump up the rankings. But if they lay an egg like they did last year, man, they got killed by Miami, then they're in trouble. Not only will they not get some of the key guys, they're going to have guys going out the door. That's the nature of recruiting, especially in Florida, where kids tend to be more fickle. Then there's two other schools that won't surprise you. Texas, they've been very patient. They got 15 kids. They're in like the battles between Texas and Texas A&M. Down the recruiting stretch, trying to think of another rivalry would be better. Maybe Texas, Oklahoma to a certain degree as well. That Texas, Louisiana area I've got circled because so many of those schools are going to bang heads. Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M, and LSU. And now SMU, Texas Tech, Baylor, with all the money they have, oil money and NIL, these recruitments can go sideways. And you got teams like Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida, Miami, etc., trying to grab some Lone Star State guys. That's going to be pretty wild. But the Texas Longhorns are going to finish in the top 10. They're one of the hardest for me to figure out exactly where, but I think the Horns finish in the top 10. And then finally, the one that I don't know where it's going to end, Florida State. They're trending for Ernest Rankins, one of the top D tackles in the country. He's from the greater Atlanta area. 6'6" guy, very athletic. When I first saw him, I'm like, holy cow, that's what it looks like. Their D-line recruiting is as good as anybody's in the country, except for maybe Georgia right now, or maybe Ohio State, but it's pretty close. Florida State is trending in the right direction. If they get Rankins and a couple of the other guys that are still, quote unquote, possible, Florida State will have made the biggest jump from one season to the next in terms of just the perception of the program on the recruiting trail, from yours truly included, as I also run Locked On Seminoles. That staff last year just didn't have enough good recruiters. They're doing a good job. So we'll see how that goes. But Florida State, they've got an outside chance, I think, a top 10 class, not maybe as good as Texas or LSU, but top 15, I think, is pretty conservative estimate. And good for the Seminoles. They're putting in the effort, and they're being rewarded. Now, Georgia and Bama, real quick, I just want to kind of touch on a few things here. Chase Calicut, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, the thumbnail that I put up for this show is a picture of Chase at Rivals 5-star. I'd been around him before, but I'd never really paid attention to him, just how long he was. These little recruitments where one school beats another, especially when they go in their backyard, huge. Georgia wants length more than any other school in the country when it comes to their defense. D-line, edge rushers, middle linebackers even. They want the 6'3" and up guys. And they'll coach them up. That's their philosophy. Obviously, it's worked pretty well for that staff. Now, Calicut could play cover 3 corner probably. I mean, he's pretty athletic. But on the back end, you could argue as a safety, he's the most gifted guy upside-wise in the country. Does he take the coaching that Georgia needs him to take and all that? Those are questions I can't answer. But they got him from Houston North Shore. A lot of people thought he was going to go to Texas. At the end of the year, when we look at the University of Texas recruiting rankings, where they're at compared to Georgia, it could come down to like one of those two schools being number 2 or 3 in the entire rankings. Calicut might be the difference for Georgia being ahead of them. It's really close at the top. The top 5, by and large, is not much. So again, Bama, I'm going to talk about them in a second. They're doing good too, but nobody's recruited over the last week and a half better than Georgia. 9 commitments in 10 days is just incredible. Calicut is just a microcosm of it, and a few of the other guys that they've gotten, I'm just going to list these off. It's insane. They've gotten James Johnson, the D tackle out of Miami Northwestern. You got Calicut. Craig Dandridge out of Milton, really good receiver. Shadarius Tootle, they flipped. He's from Cottage Hill Christian down in Mobile, linebacker that he flipped from Auburn. This is crazy. Like, they've gotten so many good football players in a short period. It shows the power of Georgia, and again, the patience to get to that point when these young men that are really highly touted can make the decisions. Now for Bama, they've gotten 7 commitments from June 22nd through June 29th. Okay, so that's not much different than UGA. Xavier Griffin, 5-star out of Gainesville, Georgia. UGA certainly would have taken him. Xavier Crowell, another kid UGA and a bunch of other schools wanted, running back out of Jackson, Alabama. He's electric. Javari Barnett, they flipped from Illinois, from Tampa Bay Tech, one of the best programs in the Sunshine State. And they go to Illinois and get tight end Max Sutter. Some people have him as the number 1 player in the state of Illinois. Bama's recruiting reach is still very, very vast. When we come back, we're going to talk about the latest commitments here on the Portal Podcast. All right, let's finish up the show talking about a few of the commitments and a few of the schools that I expect to go on their own little runs here over the next few days. PRD, he's going to Georgia, defensive lineman out of North Carolina. In this run that UGA has had, 5 of the 9 guys either play edge or D tackle. Good Lord, because you know they're not taking lower end guys. It's incredible. Pierre Dean's a kid I need to study, but he's another kid like 6'3", 6'4", 260, 270, has the frame to weigh 290 and above and play in a 3-man front if you want to do that. Georgia kind of runs a hybrid 3-man, 4-man front, asking guys to do different things, sometimes 2-gap. He has the frame to do it. Again, though, 5 different guys they've signed or gotten commitments from for UGA in that mold. Andre Clark, we expected it. It happened. Cornerback out of Virginia. He's going to be a Michigan Wolverine. They continue to recruit well. Michigan's done a great job here. As I noted earlier in the podcast, a great job. Not good, great job of finding guys all across the country. It is a truly national program. Winning the national title in 2023 is already tradition rich anyway, but the Wolverines, they're going to have a nasty defense for the foreseeable future, and good for Sharon Moore and his group. Defensive end, Wapeti Maloa, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, Orem, Utah. He's going to BYU. The money that BYU has, and I think getting Ryder Lyons, you could make the argument that BYU is the most up-and-coming program in the Big 12, or at least next to Texas Tech. Kind of depends on what your perspective is. But once Ryder Lyons gets on campus, I'm going BYU. That's a special player. I think he'll be the best player in the league by the end of his sophomore year, quite possibly. Like, he's a special player. But if they can get the defensive players to go with it, which is usually BYU's Achilles heel, look out. Victor Lincoln out of Lancaster, Texas. That's a corner going to Arkansas. Lancaster is one of the best programs in the Dallas Metroplex, has been forever. They compete with Duncanville and all these other really good programs in Dallas, Forney, etc., to be where kids want to kind of make it a destination. It's really interesting. Dallas South Oak Cliff, Duncanville, and all these other programs, they all want the same kids. They all know who they are. This kid goes to Lancaster, and they get recruited heavily by all the SEC programs. But you don't think of Arkansas getting a lot of these guys, so good for them. And how about this? Speaking of Duncanville, I did not see this coming. Props to Ole Miss. Ole Miss goes to Duncanville High School, one of the most prominent programs in the country, private, public, doesn't matter what state, very well coached. Duncanville has won state championships and been in the national rankings for a long time. Getting a defensive lineman out of Duncanville, keeping him away from the likes of A&M and Oklahoma, etc., is not easy. But Landon Barnes from Duncanville, 6'4", 240, goes to Ole Miss. That is a really big get for Lane Kiffin and his crew. Congrats to the Rebels. That's a young man that's probably going to play early. And I've said it before when I do the crossover with Steven over there at Locked On Ole Miss. They've recruited high school D linemen different the last few years. And that's the biggest reason that Ole Miss is trending as a program. Yeah, Lane's a play caller, fancy offense. You got to stop people. Ole Miss is finally getting the high school linemen to compete at a high level. And finally, Claude Impoma, Nebraska gets him 6'7", 310 out of Mount Carmel in Chicago, one of the best players in Illinois, one of the probably best high upside guys as an offensive tackle. Still a little raw, but Claude's frame is what you're looking for. And if you get guys like that at a program like Nebraska, and of course Rule, known to be a lineman coach, defensive-minded, power football, this is how you can ascend up the ladder in the Big Ten. It's going to be a tough climb. Still got Michigan, Penn State, Illinois trending. Obviously, Ohio State speaks for itself. Then even teams like Minnesota are pretty good. And then, oh, by the way, you've got Southern Cal, you've got Washington, you've got Oregon, and even UCLA. They got 4 commitments out of Florida a couple of weeks ago. It's crazy how competitive the league is. But if you're going to do it, you got to get trench players. Nebraska, the Cornhuskers have taken that next step. And Poma is going to be one of those guys they really depend on. They got Trey Taylor in the 27 class already as a quarterback. I'm happy to see Nebraska trending up. It's a really good thing. Finally, just a note. A few schools that you're going to see do well over the next week. It's going to continue for Bama, probably a little bit for Georgia. Notre Dame should have a very good week or so. Watch out for LSU in Texas with a few decisions. And I'm curious, again, I brought them up earlier, Florida State. A little bit of Florida, like they're going to battle for some kids. Watch out for Florida State. There's a lot going on with some of these schools, but the next week or so, you could argue Florida State is the most important of all of them as far as being successful because they've got to change that narrative, that direction. And they've done a really good job recruiting, especially on defense. When the Noles get linemen like this, their program goes up pretty quick. And I think if they get Rankins, and there's a couple other guys still on the board that are really key, Chauncey Kennan, corner out of Sarasota Booker, they've got a chance to end up in the top 10. You could not have sold me on that in a million years a month ago. No way. Give them credit. This is called recruiting in the modern age. You got to get on your grind. Florida State staff has done a great job. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to get all your latest recruiting news. And again, we're going to be expanding a little bit. Going to do some season previews and talk about it through the lens of recruiting, which guys can help teams get over the top, win totals, over unders, who's going to win leagues, quarterback battles, a little bit of everything, but all of it with a recruiting spin. Which team is going to be the one in your league that's going to have that recruit that comes in and makes a difference? We're going to talk about that here on the Portal Podcast. So please hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to the Portal Podcast and give us a 5-star review and leave a comment. It helps the pod. I truly appreciate it. We'll see you all again soon on the Portal Podcast.